Okay, good evening. Welcome back. Oops. All right, let's see where we're at here at the syllabus. So I think most of you have already emailed me your midterm, but just a reminder that if you haven't turned in your midterm by email, that's due today. So I think most of you have turned in the email and sent it to me, and just make sure you do that if you have not. So I think everyone seems like they're okay on the midterm, but if there's any questions on the midterm, please let me know, but make sure you get that submitted today. Okay, so just a reminder, just in case you have not turned in your midterm, make sure you do that if you haven't. Okay, and then, so we finished kind of the first third of the class. So, all the homework assignments, chapters 1 through 5, I put your grades up on Blackboard for those, so you should see a grade for homeworks 1 through 5, and also I posted my solutions for those homeworks as well. So those should be taken care of, and if there's any questions on those homeworks or your grades and solutions, then please let me know. Okay, so homework chapters 1 through 5 are graded, your grades are up, and my solutions are posted on Blackboard. So the grades, you know where those are, and the solutions. So those are all my solutions for the first 5 homeworks that we've done up to this point, okay? So we're caught up there. Once I get all your midterms submitted, I will get through those graded, and I'll probably get your grades up for the midterms sometime later this weekend, so Saturday or Sunday, something like that. All right, so we're going to move on to the second third of the syllabus. Okay, so the next block of material, starting today, is we're going to do chapters 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 16, and that'll be the stuff that will comprise midterm 2, which we'll get to in about 5 weeks, is the 2/3 point of the semester. So this is where, all the exams, remember, are not cumulative, so all the new material will be for the homeworks and the midterm 2. So today we're going to cover chapter 6 in your textbook, which is on production costs. Alright, so if there's no questions on the previous homeworks, on the exam or anything like that, we'll go ahead and start today's material on chapter 6. So let's go to the Blackboard page. Alright, you can go ahead and open up the study guide for chapter 6. Okay, we'll need this Excel file, the examples for chapter 6, so I'm just going to open that up now. Alright, and then if you want to go to the PowerPoint, you can open up the PowerPoint file for chapter 6 as well. We'll need that in a few minutes. Okay, so if you look at the discussions forum, you'll see now that there's no spot for homework 6, and that's because I don't really have a homework assignment that goes with chapter 6. So the good news here is there's not going to be any homework this week. So that's the first thing. Okay, so we have to do chapter 6. It's on production costs. We have a bunch of examples and stuff. There will be no homework this week because usually the exam I structure around this material, chapters 6 through 9 and chapter 16. There's kind of three big questions that are going to be on the next exam, and one of those comes from chapter 7 and 8, so we'll get to that next time. Because I like to do those chapters together. There's another big question from chapter 9. And there's another big question from chapter 16. So basically what I'm telling you is that the midterm 2 is going to be like 3 big questions, and chapter 6 is just kind of like the building blocks and basic material. So there won't be any midterm type questions from this chapter, and there won't be any homework, but we still have to get through it. So, but I am going to show you guys, after we do the PowerPoint and stuff, we are going to watch a few quick videos. So I'm sure you guys will take choose 2 quick videos for homework. So no homework, but we'll have a few quick videos that we need to watch for chapter 6 because this chapter is somewhat important. Okay, so no homework this week, but let's get through the material because there's quite a bit to get to. All right, so chapter 6 is on businesses and the cost of productions. We're looking at a lot of different cost curves and different types of costs. There's a lot of kind of basic definitions in this chapter. This is chapter 6 is probably not the most fun material, but it's kind of required to get to all the other good stuff in chapters 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. So let's just start by defining short run versus long run. All right, so let's look at slide 2 and slide 8, and this will help us determine in terms of microeconomics the distinction between short run versus long run. So let's go to the PowerPoint for chapter 6. Okay, so let's first define what a plant is in terms of microeconomics and how that relates to the business. So a plant is defined as anything that's kind of capital related. So it can be a factory, a farm, a mine, a store, a website. So any like basically like a big purchase, like the actual building, the actual land, the store, the website, the warehouses. So think of things that are mostly like capital related as a plant. Okay, so firms can operate one or more plants. You can have a small business where you have one plant, or you can have a bigger business or corporation that has multiple plants. And therefore you have an industry, which is a group of firms that produce the same products. So this is kind of the breakdown of industry of firms. Firms have one or more plants, and a plant has many definitions, but it's all these kind of capital-related things that go into a plant. So this will help us determine long run versus short run. If you go to slide 8. Okay, so in the way we define the plant, short run is going to be all those things are fixed. So in the short run period, you have fixed plants. So the firm cannot make any changes to those things in the short run. So all these things on slide 2, all these things are fixed in the short run, and so that's what we mean. We don't mean a certain period of time. We mean if the firm is not able to adjust and build a new factory, build a new website, build a new warehouse, etc. So if they can't make those adjustments, if those are fixed, then that's a short run period. If they can make those adjustments, then it's a long run period. So that's the big distinction. Okay, short run, fixed plants. The plants are fixed. Now they can make some adjustments in terms of labor. So you can hire more workers, you can give more labor hours, you can fire workers, stuff like that. But you cannot change the plant. The plant is fixed. But then in the long run, all the inputs, including the plants and capital, are variable. So that's the distinction where, let me summarize here. Okay, so in the short run period, only labor adjustments can be made and all plants, in the way we define them, are fixed. And therefore, in the long run, all inputs are variable, including plants. So the big thing is knowing what all those things that go into plants, and then in the short run, those adjustments can't be made. You've got what you got. In the long run period, you can make any changes you want, including plants. So that's the big distinction between short run versus long run. So it doesn't have to do with a certain amount of time, because for some firms, you can get to the short run and long run periods faster. Like if you can make those plant adjustments quicker, then your short run period is shorter. But if it takes a long time to make those adjustments, then the short run period lasts longer. So it depends 100% on how the firm can adjust its plants versus its labor. Okay, so most of the things we're going to talk about in this chapter are short run adjustments, and so therefore, if we're talking about short run, we mean that the plant is fixed and only labor decisions can be made. So that's what short run means. We can change labor, but we cannot change anything else. Alright, so now we're going to define a bunch of short run definitions that relate to the short run period only. So the first production relationships we'll talk about are these three. So we're going to define total product and marginal product and average product. All those are on slide 9. Alright, so you're going to see a bunch of like quick mathematical definitions. You don't have to memorize these equations or anything, but you have to understand the concept. So total product is just the number of product we produce. So if you produce, 100 computers, that's the total product. So total product is the total number of products that the firm produces. Okay. Marginal product is the change in total product when you change one unit of labor. So when you add one more unit of labor, what's the change or what's the marginal effect in total product? So what is the change in total product when you change labor by 1 unit? That's the marginal product. Alright, and then the average product is how much you produce on average. So it's just simply total product divided by the total units of labor. So these things are all pretty simple, but they're all very important in terms of firm decisions. So even though they're just quick definitions, make sure they're clear because they're important when you look at the graphs and the firm's short-run decisions. So total product is just the total amount of product produced. Marginal product is the product we produce in the margin. When you change 1 unit of labor, what is the change in total product? And then average is just how much product you produce with the average labor, which is just total product divided by units of labor. Alright, so there's something called the law of diminishing returns, which you're probably familiar with. And let's go through that because it's a very important concept in this section. So let's look at slides 10 through 12. Alright, so here are the assumptions for this term. So resources are of equal quality, so all the resources for the firm are the same quality. Technology is fixed, we're in a short run period. Variable resources are added to fixed resources, so the variable resources are labor. Okay, so the only variable resources in the short run period are labor, so that means that we're changing labor, but everything else is fixed. Okay. Then what you're going to see is at some point the marginal product is going to switch signs or change directions, and that's simply because if you have fixed plants and fixed, capital and technology, there's only so much work that the employees can do. So if you keep adding more and more labor, at some point it's not productive to pay the additional worker, and there's not enough work to go around, and so they become unproductive if there's not enough work for each additional unit of labor to do. So if you look at the next slide, okay, look at here where let me mix this. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. I made the slide bigger. I think you can see it. And so you can see that these are the different units of labor. So 1 unit, 2 units in column 1. And total product is the change in product when you add another unit of labor. So, or total product is the total product. So 10 10 products, 25 products. Okay, and look at the marginal product. So when you add an additional unit of labor, the change in the margin, it goes plus 10, plus 15, plus 20, and then it starts to get lower. And then look at when you go from 6 to 7, the change on the margin is 0, and then after that, it's negative. Okay, so what we're saying is that up to 6 units of labor, there's added production. At 7, it's a wash, like your labor cost equals your product, and then if you hire more than 7, 8, 9, 10, it's more costly to add the labor than to get product. So this is when you stop adding more labor. So don't hire more than 7 units of labor. Okay, so if we can see this. All right, so this further explains the concept of diminishing returns. So look, so the concept is kind of simple. So if you start at 0, and add 1 unit of labor, if you go from 0 to 1, there was nothing being produced, all of a sudden something, so there's a big return on the first unit, and then more return on the second, and it depends on the firm, but see how when you get to the green area, you're still getting more product, but it's at a lower rate than before, and then when you get to unit 7-ish, anything in the blue area, adding more product is diminishing returns, you're actually losing product. So these workers beyond 7 units are so unproductive that you're getting diminishing returns. Okay, so this is usually how the production process works. So first, increasing returns with small amounts of units of labor. Then we have increasing returns, but they're diminishing. And then we have negative returns. So this explains the concept of, I guess, the full spectrum of diminishing returns in the production process. Okay, so this is important. So let me kind of summarize what we talked about here. Okay, so the first few workers are very productive. We get the increasing marginal returns. And then when you get to the green zone, you still get positive returns, but they're at a diminishing rate. Okay, so the next group of worker hours are productive, but at a diminishing rate. So you get the diminishing marginal returns, and then when you get to the blue zone, you got to stop adding labor because you're getting less return than if you didn't have labor. So Okay, so then at some point, adding an additional unit of labor is unproductive because there isn't enough work to be done given the fixed resources, then you get the negative marginal return. So this is the three ranges of returns to labor on the margin, and this explains the concept of how labor is productive at first, then diminishing, and then if there's not enough work to go around, like there's only a certain number of computers or ovens or whatever it is, and so if you keep adding labor to a fixed resource, at some point you can't find enough work for the additional labor hour. Okay, let's see. Okay, next thing is the cost relationships. Everybody doing okay so far? Okay, let's look at slide 13 and let's define fixed costs and variable costs and total costs. Okay, so fixed costs are costs that don't vary with output. So this is like the cost you have to pay just to start the business. So if you have like, or let's go through the things and I'll think of examples. So fixed costs don't vary with output. The variable costs, they vary with output. So this is like the labor cost. And total cost is simply the sum of the two types of costs, which is this fixed cost plus variable cost. So let's think of an example in how this relates to the types of costs. Okay, so if you just think of any restaurant as like an example, then fixed costs would be all the things that you have to spend, you have to provide money for up front, regardless of the amount of labor or product that's produced. So stuff like that. So things that you have to, regardless of how much you produce on a given day, these are fixed. So you got to pay for all this stuff up front. These are all like the initial costs. So like building, ovens, stoves, tables, dishes, freezers, stuff like that. The fixed costs that don't depend on output, and then obviously the variable costs are labor. Okay, so labor depends directly on how much output you produce. If you want to, seat more tables or do more food or do more takeout, that requires more labor. So the things that depend exactly or directly on how much output you produce are variable, And the things that you have to pay for no matter what are fixed costs. And then total costs are the sum of the two, okay? Okay, what about average costs on slide 14? We'll define some more terms, which are average fixed costs, average variable costs, and average total cost. Okay, these are per unit costs or average costs. So these will play an important role in the firm's decision when we get to the next couple chapters. But for now, let's just define these terms. So average fixed cost is just the total fixed cost given how much output you produce, which is simply the total fixed cost divided by Q divided by output. All right, then average variable costs are the total variable costs on average. So this is simply total variable costs divided by Q divided by output. Okay, then so the average total costs are how much total costs are given a level of output. So this is either average variable cost plus average fixed cost or just total costs divided by Q divided by output. Okay, and then we have to define marginal costs, because this is a huge important term. Okay, so marginal costs also on slide 14. Marginal costs are the change in costs on the margin. So when you change output by 1 unit, what's the corresponding change in cost? So if you add 1 more unit of output, what's the change in cost? So this is the associated total change in total cost when you add an additional output unit. So the marginal cost always changes depending on where you are in the production process. So wherever you are, if you add 1 more unit of output, what's the change in total cost? Or what's the change in cost on the margin? Okay, so when you change output, what's the change in total cost? Okay, if we look at the next slide, slide 15, this will show us the short run production costs together. Let me try to make this a little bigger. Alright, so hopefully we can see this, but there's a bunch of columns which help explain the cost. So we have the total product. This is how much output is produced. Column 1. Column 2 is the total fixed cost. You can see that that's always the same because you got to pay that no matter what. So the total fixed cost is 100 no matter how much output you produce. Column 3, the total variable cost. You can see this changes with every different unit of output because your variable cost by definition depends on how much output you produce. Okay, Column 4 is just the total cost, so that's the sum of the variable and the fixed in each level of output. Column 5 is the average fixed cost, so that's just the fixed cost on average. Just divide fixed cost by Q. Okay, average variable cost. Column 6 is the average cost, the average variable cost. So just divide total variable cost by Q. Okay, and then average total cost is how much costs are on average at the given point. So either add average total cost and average fixed cost together, or take total cost and divide by Q. All right, and then importantly, marginal cost, column 8. Okay, see how every time you add an additional, or you produce an additional unit of product, what's the associated change in cost? So we go from total cost. So here's the 100. So if you go from 100 if you go from 0 to 1, the change in cost is 90, right? If you go from 1 to 2, the change in cost is 80. So the change on the margin is the marginal cost. Okay, and then let's look at all the cost curves on a graph. This is a nice picture on slide 16. Alright, so hopefully we can see this picture of the cost curves together. So the costs, all the monetary values are on the y-axis where it says cost, and all the output levels are on the x-axis where it says Q. So this is the associated costs at different levels of output, and you can see that, let's start with, let's see, average fixed cost. The green one at the bottom, you can see that if you don't produce much output, the average fixed cost is very high, but it starts to level out and decrease on average if you produce more output, okay? Average variable cost first drops and then increases again, and then average total cost is just kind of the sum of average fixed cost and average variable cost. And then marginal cost, you can see it kind of dips down and then increases, okay? So with each level of output, this is the associated marginal cost, average total cost, average variable cost, and average fixed cost. Okay, and the costs don't have to look exactly like this, but this is kind of what the cost curves look like, given a firm's output relationship. Okay, so let's exit here. All right, so I'm gonna show you guys some quick videos in a minute because I want to get some more on the cost curves, because I think these quick videos are helpful. So we ran through the key concepts. There's a lot of just kind of definitions and terms here. The different types of product, the different types of costs, the different types of average costs, and you got marginal costs and marginal product and the cost curves. So basically just a bunch of definitions that are going to be needed for latter problems. But any questions so far on these terms? Everybody doing okay? Okay. Let me. So we normally don't watch the videos, but like I said, there's no homework assignment this week, but we do have to go through the examples, and I do want to show you some quick videos because it explains a lot on the cost curve. So all these videos 1, 2, and 3, they're like 5 minutes or less. So let's watch these real quick, and then we'll make sure we understand all the short run cost curves. Okay, let's watch part two. Okay, one more quick one, and we're done with the cost curve stuff. so I think those three quick videos are pretty helpful, explaining all these costs and curves and relationships. So give those another view if you want to go over the costs. But for now, let's look at some examples. Okay, so let's look at some examples. Did we like the videos? Did you guys learn something? Okay, let's go to example number one. So this will help us determine the distinction between long run versus short run that we talked about the very first key term. Okay, so which of the following are short run and which are long run adjustments? So there's a statement and then just note, well, I already did, but let's note which is a long run adjustment and which is a short run adjustment. Okay, so Wendy's builds a new restaurant. So remember, a restaurant goes into the plant category, and plants can only change in the long run. So if a restaurant is a plant and plants are long run adjustments, then that means this is the long run period. Okay, part B, Harley-Davidson Corporation hires 200 more production workers. All right, so that's a labor adjustment. Labor can change any time, including the short run. So if you change labor, that's a short run adjustment. Okay, C, a farmer increases the amount of fertilizer used on his corn crop. So this is just essentially more labor hours used to put fertilizer on the crop. So if you can classify this as a short or a labor adjustment, right? This is a short run adjustment, so it's kind of worded weirdly, but if more fertilizer just requires more labor, then that's a short run adjustment. And then D, an Alcoa aluminum plant adds a third shift of workers. So again, that's another labor adjustment. That's a short run period because you can always adjust labor. And so that is short run. Alright, so anytime you change anything that goes into the plant category, that's a long run adjustment. If you just change labor, that is a short run adjustment, and that's the distinction. Okay, number two is, this is from the textbook, and I did this in Excel, but please complete the table by calculating marginal product and average product. Okay, so we're given the units of labor, the total product, and we need to calculate marginal product and average product. So if you go to this Excel file, okay, so this is the Excel file that I posted on Blackboard for examples chapter 6. Okay, so I just copied and I just retyped in. The units of labor here, and then the total product. So we're given this 0 through 8. So these are the different units of labor, and this is the total product. Now what we had to calculate is the marginal product. Okay, so see how this is the change in product on the margin. So I just want you to see that I wrote a little formula, but it's just the change in product with each unit of labor. So when you go from 0 to 1, the change is 15, right? It goes from 0 to 15. When you go from 1 to 2 units, you go from 15 to 34. So the change is 34 minus 15, which is 19. So each of these is the change in total product when you add one more unit of labor, okay? So all these are the marginal changes. Then look, when you go from 70 units of labor to 8, the change, you go from 83 to 82, so the change is minus 1. Okay, so notice how this marginal change is just the change when each additional unit of labor is added. All right, and then the average product is just divide the total product by the number of units of labor. So 15 divided by 1 is 15, okay? Here, the total product is 34. Divide that by 2, you get 17. Here, the total product is the total product is 51. Divide that by 3, you get 17. So the average product is just the total product divided by the units of labor, which is how much product you produce on average at each point. Okay, so everyone sees how we determine marginal product and average product. Yeah. All right. So this is a table I copied and pasted it from Excel, but just make sure that given the units of labor and the total product, you know how to get or calculate marginal product. And then average product. So you can look at the Excel file to see what I did there, but we're just applying the definitions of marginal product and average product to the chart here. Okay, example number 3. So this is another chart that we're going to go through. So firm has fixed costs of 60 and variable costs as indicated below, and then the rest of the stuff we have to complete. So we're given total product 1 through 10, and we're given total fixed costs. Okay, we're given fixed costs, and we're given variable costs. So let's determine fixed costs, total costs, average fixed costs, average variable costs, average total costs, and marginal costs. So I made a little chart in the Excel file, so you go back to that. Okay, so this is for that one. I made another chart. So total product goes from 0 to 10. That's given. Fixed cost is always 60. So see how total fixed cost is always 60. Total variable cost was given at each unit of product, and then we need to calculate the rest. So total cost is easy. That's just the sum of total plus fixed. So 60 plus 0 is 60. 60 plus 45 is 105. So the total cost is the sum of the two types of cost, which are fixed and variable. Average fixed cost is the fixed cost divided by the total product, so the fixed cost on average. So this is just 60 divided by 1 is, Okay, so 60 divided by 1 is 60. All right, and then 60 divided by 2 is 30. So just divide the fixed cost by the total product, and you can see that the fixed cost always decreases because the average cost is levelized when you keep producing more product, given the fixed cost is the same. Okay, so 60 divided by 1 is 60. 60 divided by 2 is 30. 60 divided by 3 is 20, and so on. So just Average fixed cost is the fixed cost divided by total product. Now, average variable cost is the average variable cost. So just take total variable cost and divide it by the total product. Alright, so 45 divided by 1 is 45. 85 divided by 2 is 43. 120 divided by 3 is 40, and so on. So just at each level of product, divide variable cost by the product to get the average variable cost. Okay, and then average total cost, you can either add these two together, or you can take the total cost and divide it by the product. So 105 divided by 1 is 105. 145 divided by 2 is 73. 180 divided by 3 is 60, and so on. So just stick with the definition. Average total cost is just the total cost, total variable cost, divided by total product. So the total variable cost on average, just divide this by this. Sorry, total cost by total product. Alright, then the final column is marginal cost. So this is the change in total cost on the margin. So when you go from, when you add 1 unit of product, what's the change in the margin on total cost? So when you go from 0 to 1, the total cost goes from 60 to 45, so the change is 45. When you go from 1 to 2, total cost goes from 45 to 85, so the change is 40. So the change from one point to the next is the marginal cost, right? And so you see that the marginal cost goes up, goes down, and then when the diminishing returns kick in, when the additional units of labor become more expensive, then the cost starts to go up. So the marginal cost kind of dips down and then goes back up like you saw in the picture. So if I were to graph this, okay, so you see how that's how you get the graphical picture from the chart. So just like we saw in the video, in the slide, and in your textbook, this is if you just graph the marginal cost point by point, you'll see that due to diminishing returns, at first it goes down, and then once it becomes more costly to pay for workers of labor, then the cost keeps increasing because each time you add more workers, they're now more costly after this point of 4. Okay, so that my Excel file is up in Blackboard. You can look at there. So there's a lot of terms going on, but so questions on the different cost curves, the average cost curve, the marginal cost, and how that kind of why the graph kind of looks the way it is. So it just has to do with diminishing returns, and then kind of the average cost being leveled out as you produce more product. So make sure you understand how to get all these columns here just based on their definition. So total cost, the average cost, and the marginal cost, which is the changing cost on the margin. Okay, so that was that one, and I copied and pasted the chart here. Okay, so everybody doing okay? Any questions on this stuff? Okay, example question number 4. All right, so this is a nice one because it explains diminishing returns. So let's read the problem. So imagine you have some workers and some handheld computers they use to take inventory to warehouse. Their diminishing returns to taking inventory. If one worker uses one computer, he can inventory 100 items per hour. 2 workers sharing a computer can together inventory 150 items per hour. And then 3 workers sharing a computer can together inventory 160 items per hour. And then 4 or more sharing a computer can together inventory fewer than 160. Okay? So we're trying to find the most cost-effective pairing. If computers cost $100 each, and you must pay each worker $25 an hour, okay, if you assign 1 worker per computer, what's the total cost of inventorying a single item? What about 2 workers? And then what about 3? So the goal is how many workers per computer should you assign if you wish to minimize the cost of inventorying a single item. So let's determine first the cost per item. So the cost per item here is just the computer cost plus the labor cost, that's the total cost, divided by the item's inventory. So the computer cost is like the fixed cost. And the labor cost is like the variable cost. So that's a good example of what a fixed cost might be and what a labor cost might be. So if you add up the 2 costs, the computer cost and labor cost, and divide that by the total item's inventory, then that's going to give you the cost per item, right? The total cost per item, given the fixed cost, the variable cost, and what you got in terms of items inventory. So this is the general formula we're going to use. Okay, and let's apply that for the different options. So let's say we have 1 worker per computer. So the cost per item is going to be the computer cost. So the computers cost $100, right? And each worker is going to be paid $25 an hour. So therefore, if you have 1 person on 1 computer, the fixed cost, the computer cost is $100. The labor cost is $25 an hour for that worker, giving us $125. And it says if we have 1 worker per computer, you can inventory 100 items per hour. Okay, so $100 for the computer, 25 for the labor hours, and then that gives us 100 items inventory. So the total cost is 125 divided by 100, which is 125 is the cost per item. So if you assign 1 worker, the cost per inventory an item is $1.25. Now, what about 2 workers? Okay, so if you have 2 workers, you have to add up the total cost of the computer, and then the 2 people get paid $25 for the first person, $25 for the second person, and then it says in the problem that 2 workers can inventory 150 items per hour. Okay, so here's the cost, 100 plus 25 plus 25, that gives us 150 items. And that gives us $150 divided by 150, which is exactly $1 here. So the cost per item is $1 if you have 2 workers per computer. All right, then what about 3 workers? Okay, so the computer cost is 100, and you got to pay 3 people $25, 25 plus 25 plus 25. And it says in the problem that 3 workers sharing a computer together can inventory 160 items per hour. Alright, so here's the cost, 100 plus 25 plus 25 plus 25 for all the labor for each person. And then you can inventory 160. So that gives us $175 divided by 160, which gives us exactly, or approximately, $1.09 is the cost per item. So you can see here that in terms of a per unit cost per item, 1 worker we get each item costs us $125 to do. 2 workers, it costs us $1, and then 3 workers, it costs $1.09. Okay, so clearly given the options, if we did the calculations correctly, with the diminishing returns, the changing cost, that more than 2 workers, there's not, I mean, this makes sense because if you have 2 workers, then 1 person can operate the computer, and 1 person can like look at the items and report back the information. But most likely, if you have a 3rd person, what's the 3rd person going to do? There's only 1 person that can operate the computer, and 1 person that can go report back the items, and then the 3rd person has less work to do. So more than 2 workers become less productive. You get diminishing returns. And therefore, you should assign 2 workers per computer if you wish to minimize the cost of inventorying a single item, because this illustrates the very important concept of diminishing returns, where more than 2 workers per computer don't have enough work to be productive. And so when you had a 3rd worker or a 4th or a 5th, your cost per item goes up, because you still have to pay the labor cost, but you're getting kind of like less bang for your buck. Yeah. Okay, so let's just go through let's scan through what we learned here. So again, a lot of definitions in this chapter, but these are important building blocks for the next 3 or 4 chapters. So just know that the distinction between short run and long run, where what goes into a plant and what goes into short run versus long run. If the plant can change, that's a long run adjustment. If only labor changes, it's short run. All right, we have the different types of short run production relationships, and we just illustrated diminishing returns, which determines the cost curves and everything else. The total costs are fixed and variable. Okay, the average cost, which we looked at the graph of, marginal cost, which shows the cost change on the margin when you get 1 more product. And we looked at the 3 videos and the examples of the cost curves. So short run versus long run, make sure you understand how to calculate marginal product and average product, like I did here. Look at the Excel file for reference. And then for this one, just look at the chart again if you want, to make sure you understand how to calculate the total cost, all the average cost, and then marginal cost for each total product. And then the last one, just make sure you understand how this illustrates the concept of diminishing returns. And you should see that this shows that if there's not enough work to go around, then adding more and more labor or workers becomes more costly, which shows nicely the concept of diminishing return. All right, so we are probably going to finish early tonight. So any questions on Chapter 6 or any of the concepts that we went through here? All right, so just a few reminders, and then we'll finish up for the evening. All right, so just a final reminder that if you haven't sent me your midterm, make sure you do that tonight. The midterm one is due today via email. Also, no homework assignment this week. Nothing for this chapter, but I do want you to make sure you understand the concepts. And just note that next week's meeting we're gonna do 2 chapters, so it's not gonna take too long, but will be a double chapter day because I like to do those chapters together. So next week we're doing sorry, that chapter 7 and chapter 8. Okay, so we just did chapter 6. So next week, chapter 7 and chapter 8. So next week we'll definitely need the full 2 hours because I want to cover both the chapters. So there's a couple days I have scheduled for 2 chapters, next week being one of them. But no homework assignment this week. But plan for the full 2 hours next week because I want to cover those 2 chapters and the homework assignment for chapters 7 and 8. But I think that's it for tonight unless we have questions. So let me know if you have questions on the exam or anything else from the chapter, but otherwise, that's it. And enjoy the rest of your week. Stay safe. Next week, we'll do chapter 7 and 8. And thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one, Professor.
You too, thanks.